Terrorism. Stamps out like it's a cockroach.
They have hate.
Jews fight back! Jews fight back! Jews fight back! Jews fight back!
Jews fight back! Jews fight back!
Jews fight back!
So we're out here today in front of a bookstore where Linda Sarsour is due to give a speech. There are some people who are upset with her coming, and now you guys are counter-demonstrating the demonstration.
Exactly.
Can you tell me a little bit more about why you're out here?
Yes, we know Linda Sarsour personally. We know these folks here protesting against her. We know them for a long time. You know, all what's going on here is totally wrong. Being anti-Zionist, criticizing crimes that are being committed towards the Palestinian people, and if these crimes happen to be perpetrated by some people from Jewish descent, unfortunately, doesn't make critics to those crimes anti-Semitic at all.
But I want to give you a specific example
Please.
now. So Linda Sarsour was part of the Women's March, by no means a right-wing organization, the Women's March. She was a speaker for the event, but then she was asked to step down. She was kind of forced to step down from charges of anti-Semitism in that organization. She also kind of hobnobs with people who are known anti-Semites, people like Louis Farrakhan, who I guess he calls Jews termites. So does it bother you to see people on the left call her anti-Semitic, and then her hobnobbing with people like Louis Farrakhan, who again call Jews things like termites?
Again, no, I'm not going into all the small details. I know Linda Sarsour personally. I met her several times. I didn't find anything anti-Semitic, not in her words, not in her approach towards towards Jewish people.
There seems to be a consensus amongst the Jewish community that she is anti-Semitic. Do you ever feel like you're used as a token who isn't representative of the Jewish community, saying that she isn't anti-Semitic?
Listen, if there was a poll by some people from the Jewish community, we have to first study and to know exactly who those people from the Jewish community are. Unfortunately, they
Among
are.
Jewish press, there is wide-scale consensus on Linda Sarsour being anti-Semitic, even in the media. This isn't just Jewish right-wing people.
Well, we have to study the Jewish press and the backgrounds of it to know exactly what they stand for and for what politics they stand for. We have to clarify again the issue. Criticizing crimes perpetrated by the State of Israel is in no means anti-Semitic.
So Linda Sarsour says she supports...
It's my Jewishness that makes me speak up against the crimes of the State of Israel. It's my religion that dictates me to protest the crimes of Israel. It's my religion that dictates me to condemn this violation of Judaism.
So I had one last question for you. Linda Sarsour has defended armed resistance, something that other people call terrorism. So she's been okay with that. Terrorism coming from groups like Hamas. I want to ask you, would you condemn terrorism from Hamas?
We need, if we are concerned for Jewish people, and I am Jewish and I am concerned for Jewish people, I am concerned for the blood of Jewish people that is being spilled for so long. For what reason?
Do you condemn terrorism coming from Hamas?
For what reason? For this occupation of Palestine, which is unjust in the very first place. I'm not going into all the details. I am condemning the cause, the root cause of Jewish blood being spilled for decades. End of sentence.
So you condemn the political violence and the terrorism coming from Hamas?
I speak up and I condemn the root cause of the bloodshed that we experience on both sides for decades.
So you do condemn the terrorism, because we're doing a lot of, we're having a lot of qualifiers here. Hamas sends suicide bombers into Israel. They've dug tunnels trying to send troops and kidnap soldiers from Israel. Would you condemn Hamas doing things like building tunnels into Israel?
We need to go to understand what's behind all of what we see presently on the surface. On the surface. And I am going to answer as many times it's necessary.
Please.
No.
Please.
No. We are going to end
Please.
this conversation and I'll be happy to speak to you.
So even, I just wanted to focus on that one point.
I
even
am
the tunnels,
focusing
violence in the earth.
focusing on one point.
Sure.
Jewish people lived in peace. Prior to the 1920s in Palestine with Muslims and with Christians.
They didn't live in peace in the Middle East amongst their Muslim brothers.
Please do not interrupt. Jewish people lived in peace in Palestine with Palestinian Muslims and Christians, again in peace.
Absolutely.
This peace was destroyed. Why? and by whom.
Okay, so
we have
this
to
anti-Semitism
understand that
predates
all
this stuff.
conflict that we are witnessing for decades in Palestine is because the occupation of Palestine. End of sentence.
Sure thing.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much for your time,
And
sir.
I-
Elbow shake because
I
of Corona?
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're out here today in New York City. Linda Sarsour is due to do a little book signing and give a little speech. You're out here protesting her. You have a sign over here with a picture of Linda Sarsour next to a swastika. Tell me a little bit more about why you're out here, what's going on.
Well, I'm here, first of all, to support the Jewish stand here. And we don't support someone who supports terrorist organization, because what Linda Sarsour does is calls for the destruction of Israel. She calls for the destruction of the Jewish people. She's not a nice person, and people need to know about her. And the Strand bookstore is having her sell her book, and it happens to be also a Jewish owned, from what I understand. So we're here to support our stance, and we don't believe in the destruction of Israel, and we don't believe that someone who supports terrorists should be a speaker or given the spotlight.
So,
you know?
so you're saying that she supports terrorism, and that's a very aggressive, bold claim to make about somebody. Do you have examples of what she's done in the past that makes you think that?
Well, she said publicly that she supports the Palestinian cause, and she supports she calls Israelis cockroaches, Zionists. So that's enough, all in itself. And I don't have any proof on me, but I have read, and I am knowledgeable, and I have seen.
She hobnobs with some of these figures. I also wanted to ask about the imagery, though, that you're bringing up here. So this is a swastika. Do you think this is proper imagery to bring up when comparing, Linda Sarsour to this? Is this a valid comparison, do you think?
Well, I think that you could say that the agenda of like you can say the Mufti, during Nazi Germany, during World War II, they were in cahoots or with the Nazi regime. So she's pretty much supporting, you can say, that same agenda by enforcing Sharia law. That's what another plan that she has, or that she's for, is promoting Sharia law in the United States. So that, in a way, is like a Nazi portrayal, or against a Jew,
I had one last question for you. Bernie Sanders is one of the most, I would say, he had the highest polling in America before as a Jewish candidate, and Linda Sarsour is a surrogate of Bernie Sanders.
Right.
Does it concern you or confuse you at all why Bernie Sanders would bring on Linda Sarsour as somebody to be a surrogate for him if she is anti-Semitic?
I think it's a wrong move on his part. Really, honestly, he's thinking that will bring up his polls for whatever reason, and maybe he knows something that we don't,
You're upset with Linda Sarsour speaking here.
Yeah.
So tell me more about your experience with being here so far.
My experience is I tried to have a dialogue with one of the protesters, which I maybe shouldn't have, because I was sort of immediately countered with someone yelled "Jihad Jew" at me. I had a camera put in my face and I was being filmed while I was trying to engage in a dialogue, and then when I tried to disengage, I was just sort of harassed more.
I know what they're saying is that Linda Sarsour is anti-Semitic. So do you disagree or agree that Linda Sarsour is anti-Semitic? I guess that's the premise here, right?
I mean, frankly, I haven't read her book, but I do think that not being able to have a critical conversation about imperialism is problematic and not at its core anti-Semitic. I'm of Jewish lineage.
So I want to ask you, are you familiar with the Women's March?
Yes.
So she was one of the speakers at the Women's March. I know a lot of the people here were talking about how she was forced to step down from being a speaker at the Women's March from charges from anti-Semitism. So this isn't kind of like a partisan attack. So would that concern you if the Women's March organizers, wanted her to step down because of charges of anti-Semitism?
I I mean, frankly, I don't want to speak to something that I'm not super familiar with. Yeah, I do know there's problems with intersectionality or a lack of intersectionality in the Women's March. That was a concern for me as someone who was involved in the Women's March at a
Because
time.
Linda Sarsour now, she's a popular figure, and I guess that's why these people are so upset. She's a surrogate for Bernie Sanders, whose campaign is, we don't know where that's going.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
do you think it's concerning that we have this mainstream figure being, or this figure being mainstream that does have concerns about anti-Semitism?
Again, I don't feel comfortable speaking to something that I'm not, if I'm not familiar enough about it, and that's why I kind of wanted to engage in a dialogue. But there was no way I could engage in a dialogue, and so.
Why do you think these people are so upset today?
I think people are uncomfortable having complicated situations, and so they sort of plant themselves into opposing camps, and instead of being able to have healthy dialogues, kind of rush to sort of attack mode. Like I was told, I must have no education. They asked what I did, and I said I was a teacher, and they said, like, you're probably indoctrinating your children with evil.
Wow.
So I would love to be able to have a dialogue, but I don't.
Well, if
think
you could
that's
have that
gonna happen.
dialogue, what would you tell them then? You were talking a little bit about imperialism, I think it was earlier, and how does that tie in here then? Or what was the issue you wanted to bring up to them?
I just think that it's incredibly dangerous in any conflict not to sort of be able to look at the greater context. I think that the United States has sort of a heavy meddling hand abroad, and that sort of the money and the weaponry behind that sort of militaristic imperialism is.
Do you think Israel
I'm
is
sorry,
an imperialistic nation in the area?
I don't. I think I don't want to say that.
Okay.
I do think
Because it sounds like that's
I'm
what
more
we were implying
I'm more
almost.
troubled by the United States' involvement in sort of perpetuating and contributing to imperialism.
In many senses, America says they're supporting the only democracy in the area, right? Israel is the only democracy really in the Middle East that does have free and open and fair elections. So would you really call that like almost imperialism, supporting that free country, the only free country in the area that does give everybody in their country rights?
No, and I'm not talking specifically about Israel, and I don't want it to seem as though I'm speaking critically of Israel. I think I'm just looking at sort of our greater global structures. And I think conflict, when you're thinking about conflict, you have to think about sort of resources and imperialism and access. And I just think it's nuanced. Yeah. And there's like a level of nuance that like there's the conversation was just not going to happen.
I had one last question for you. We are seeing some extreme imagery because on some of these signs there's a picture of Linda Sarsour next to a swastika. What do you think about that imagery that you said you were of Jewish descent? Some people here are of Jewish descent. So what do you think about them evoking that imagery here?
Again, I do not know enough about her or her platform
So I
to
guess
be
we have
able
to look
to
her up.
speak to
Yeah,
that,
yeah, okay.
but I'm a little uncomfortable with the way people position women of color. I feel like women of color are sometimes more readily positioned as sort of like
Feels like we're throwing around Nazi very easily on both sides nowadays. Everybody's very eager to call the other person a Nazi.
Yeah.
I know Trump's called a Nazi a lot. Linda Sarsour is being called the Nazi here. It's almost like we're calling everybody Nazi. It doesn't seem very productive.